Let's talk about Venezuela, the United States, and one of the most persistent political stories of the last decade. Every few years, sometimes every few months, a headline appears suggesting that the United States tried to remove Nicolás Maduro from power. Sometimes it's framed as a raid, sometimes it's framed as a kidnapping attempt, sometimes it's an assassination plot, and every time people ask the same question: why? Why would the United States want Nicolas Maduro gone so badly? And why does the US always say he didn't do it, even though many people around the world find that hard to believe? To understand this, we have to go much further back than Maduro himself, because Maduro is not the origin of this conflict. He's the continuation of it. We have to go back to Hugo Chavez. When Hugo Chavez came to power in Venezuela in 1999, he didn't just win an election. It disrupted a system that had existed for decades. Venezuela, that had long been part of the US sphere of influence, and American oil companies were deeply embedded in the country, and Venezuelan elites were aligned with Washington. Chavez changed that almost immediately. He nationalized oil. He redirected profits towards social programs. He openly criticized American foreign policy. And most importantly, he framed Venezuela as part of a global left-wing resistance to US dominance. Chavez didn't hide his ideology. He spoke openly about socialism, imperialism, and what he saw as centuries of exploitation in Latin America. From Washington's point of view, this wasn't just an unfriendly government. This was a dangerous example. Venezuela sits on the largest proven oil reserves on earth, about 300 billion barrels of oil. Not one of the largest, the largest. And Chavez was saying very clearly that this oil would no longer primarily serve US interests. Instead, it began to build relationships with countries the US views as rivals, including Cuba, Russia, Iran, and eventually China, who it sells 80% of its crude oil to. This matters because US foreign policy has never been only about democracy. It has always been about influence, access, and control of strategic resources. Chavez threatened all three. Now, when Chavez died in 2013, many outside Venezuela assumed the tension might ease. Instead, Nicolas Maduro took power and largely continued Chavez's agenda. Maduro lacked Chavez's charisma and political skill, but ideologically he stayed the course. He remained anti-US, pro-China, pro-Russia, possibly pro-Iran, and committed to a state-controlled economic model. He even got possibly close to Burkina Faso's Ibrahim Traore. At the same time, Venezuela's economy began to collapse. Some of that was due to falling oil prices. Some of it was due to mismanagement. Some of it was due to corruption. And some of it was due to US sanctions. The result was a humanitarian crisis that shocked the world. From the US perspective, Maduro became the perfect target. He was unpopular internationally. His country was in crisis, and his removal could be framed as a moral intervention rather than a strategic one. This is where the public explanation and the private motive began to diverge. Officially, the United States says its opposition to Maduro is about democracy, human rights, and authoritarianism. Washington argues that Maduro's elections were illegitimate and his government suppresses opposition and that Venezuelans deserve a democratic transition. It also talks about the drug cartel that is taking place in Venezuela, although a lot of experts are saying that less than 5% of cocaine actually is coming from Venezuela, as the channels tend to be Colombia, Bolivia, and other South American countries. And to be clear, there are real and serious criticisms of Maduro's government. The political repression exists, economic mismanagement exists, corruption exists. These are not invented problems. But critics of US policy argue that this explanation is incomplete. They point out that the US has supported authoritarian governments when those governments aligned with American interests. Don't forget, this current administration in Venezuela is left-leaning, whereas America is on the right with Donald Trump in power. They point to decades of intervention in Latin America from Chile to Guatemala to Panama. Anybody remembers Manuela Noriega? Hmm. Where democracy was not the primary concern. So when the US says this is about democracy, many people hear something else. They hear oil, 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 300 billion barrels of oil. They hear power, 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 indirect or direct power. And they hear international geopolitics. This is where China enters the picture. Over the last 2 decades, China has quietly become one of Venezuela's most important partners. China loaned Venezuela tens of billions of dollars, often with oil as repayment. Chinese companies became involved in infrastructure, energy, and telecommunications. Venezuela became part of China's broader strategy to secure long-term energy supplies and expand its global influence. From Washington's point of view, this is a nightmare scenario. A country with the world's largest oil reserves sitting in the Western Hemisphere, aligned not with the US, but with China. This is not just about Venezuela alone. This is about global power competition. The United States sees the Western Hemisphere as its strategic backyard. That mindset has never fully disappeared. When China gains influence in Africa, Asia, or Latin America, US policymakers do not see it as neutral economic engagement. They see it as a challenge. So when people ask why would the US want Maduro removed, the answer is not simple, but it is clear. It is about oil. It is about influence. It is about ideology. And it is about stopping China from embedding itself deeper into a region the US has historically dominated. Maduro represents a form of left-wing populism that rejects Western capitalism. The US, by contrast, supports market-driven systems and liberal democracy in theory, but prioritizes stability and alignment in practice. This ideological clash amplifies every conflict. To the right, Maduro is an authoritarian socialist destroying his country. To the left, Maduro is a flawed but defiant leader standing up to imperial pressure. The truth, as always, sits somewhere in between. Do you think this is about democracy or about power or both? Please let me know what your comments are in the comment section. Kindly subscribe to my channel and share this if you enjoyed it. See you in the next one.